So the point being is that really the aql in our tradition is a very mysterious and profound thing. And thoughts are really the source of thoughts remains a mystery in Western science, but for us, we believe that the source of thoughts, we actually have a science of khawatir. So there are nafsani thoughts, shaitani thoughts, malakani thoughts, and rabbani thoughts. Even though they're all from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but the asbab of those thoughts are demonically, egoistically inspired thoughts, demonically inspired thoughts, angelically inspired thoughts, and then lordly inspired thoughts. And there's a whole science to that, that in our tradition that originally came out of Imam al-Muhasibi's insights into it. So that's the book, and then he goes into Qawaid al-Aqaid. So after the book of knowledge, he begins faith, because faith in our tradition is based on knowledge. And then he goes into Asrar al-Tahara. And what's important, and this is really distinct about even though there are people before Imam al-Ghazali that looked at what are called the hikam, the wisdoms behind traditions. He really wanted to help people get out of a formalistic approach to the religion, to where it was perfunctory, that these are all outward things that don't have inward meaning. So he really saw that it was very important for people to understand the spiritual realities behind these things that we're doing. When the Prophet ﷺ said, "At-tahur shatrul iman," he did not simply mean that water purification, what we call lustrations or the wudu, water purification is half of iman. Tahur is the purification of the soul. And so what you're doing when you're doing wudu, when you're washing your hands of the sins, which is why some of the scholars consider that water is not reusable, because the sins get washed away in it. And so the face, removing any sins from the face, and the eyes, and the cleaning the mouth, all these things, he shows the spiritual insights that will really help a person to perform them. The secrets of the prayer, the secrets of zakat, the secrets of fasting, the secrets of hajj. And then, and this is what I find really stunning, is that when he deals with all the ruba' ibadah, he goes through aqidah, iman, and then he goes through the 5 pillars of Islam. The very first thing that he brings into focus is the adab of reciting Quran, because of the centrality of the recitation of Quran as an act of worship in our religion. This is really important, because the Prophet ﷺ said he was commanded in the Quran to worship Allah and to recite the Quran. He says, I was commanded to worship Allah and to recite the Quran. So this is really important. And then he has fi adhkar wa da'wat. So these are the awrad that the Prophet ﷺ did, and he did many, but the most important one is the Quran. And then the tartib al-awrad, like how to do, and then Ihya al-layl, so giving some portion of the night. Even if night prayers begin according to the Malikis after Maghrib. So giving some portion of the night, even if you just pray 2 rakats in excess of the sunnah rakats after Isha, you've given some portion of the night that is devotional. So that's really important, because the Prophet ﷺ said, help me help you get across the sirat. And the way he said to do that was to give him a portion of the night, like just to give some portion of the night. The second, so those are the ibadat. The second are the ruba' al-adat or al-mu'amalat. So these are the things, the customary behavior of human beings. Even though in his tradition, and Ibn al-Hajj al-Abdari, who was heavily influenced by Imam al-Ghazali, he's 8th century scholar, originally from Fez, but he resides in Egypt. He wrote a book called Al-Madkhal, which is really showing you how you can make every single customary practice that you do and turn it into an act of ibadah. This is like deep prophetic mindfulness. So he begins that with adab al-akal, and then adab al-nikah, and then adab al-kasb wal-ma'ash. Like these are the adab, all of those aspects of eating and drinking, of marrying, of earning a livelihood, all of those that relate to how we should be in the best way, the adab of them. What are the proper ways of doing these things? The decorum, the comportment, the courtesies. It's adab is a comprehensive word, so you can't limit it to simply just courtesy. But it's all of those things that relate. And the adaba means to discipline. So adab are the results of your discipline. It's your habitual practices. And so the adib in Arabic, which is the literary scholar, the adib is somebody who is, he puts words in their proper place. That's the meaning of an adib. And so adab is putting things in their proper place. So he's giving you all the things to do in these customary habits of human beings that are proper. And then al-halal wal-haram, knowing what's permissible and what's impermissible. This is a very important science. And then adab al-ulfa wal-ukhuwa, the adab of just friendship, the duties of brotherhood. So we have certain adabs that are really important with one another. So, and then adab al-uzla. Also, many people don't know how to be alone. And hence Pascal's great insight that most of the world's problems were from the inability of people to sit with themselves alone in a room. You have to know how to be alone. And many people do not know how to be alone. And they end up becoming really minions of Iblis, because Iblis can wreak havoc on people that don't know how to be alone. And so uzla is very important as a concept. And then adab as-safar, also traveling, the niyyah of traveling, why you're traveling, how you travel. All those things are very important. And then adab as-sama' wal-wajd. This is very interesting because this would go, to me, in essence, under a kind of, the reason he puts it in adat and not in ibadat is because it's a kind of spiritual entertainment. It's really a recreation. And so there's also adab to that. So I find that really fascinating. And then amr bil ma'ruf and nahy an al-munkar. And this is essentially what jihad is. People say, oh, there's no book of jihad in the Ihya. But this is essentially the book of jihad, because that's what jihad is. It's amr bil ma'ruf and nahy an al-munkar. But it's doing it with the hand. That's the jihad of the hand, not of the tongue or of the heart. And then adab al-ma'isha wa akhlaq al-nubuwah. This is the key to understanding the fact that he puts this as book 20. So this is the heart of the book. Out of the 40 books, he put the Prophet's character, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, at book 20. So this is the heart of the Ihya. And it's actually, I think, really the most beautiful book to read. It's one of the most enjoyable books to read. So fortunately it's been translated, and there's a recent new translation that I think is coming out soon. Then he goes into Rub' al-Muhlikat, and this is the section, the quarter on the destructive aspects of the human being. And so this is really important because according to Imam al-Ghazali, when we were talking earlier about the 4 areas of fasad that he mentioned, the first one he deals with in the book of knowledge, which is ignorance. But the second one is love of dunya. And love of dunya resides in the heart of the human being. And so he begins this by explaining the wonders of the heart. Because the heart is the most extraordinary thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created, especially if you understand in our tradition that the intellect resides in the heart. So the heart really is, لَهُمْ قُلُوبٌ لَا يَفْقَهُونَ بِهَا. They have hearts, but they don't understand with them. So the heart is filled with ajaib. So he goes into this because the heart is what Iblis is after. The destruction of the heart is literally the goal of Iblis. So the muhlikat are going to focus on looking at what happens, these destructive qualities. And then riyadatun nafs, why we have to exercise our souls. The fact that he uses this word, and this was a word that the spiritual masters of Islam used, The fact that they use the same word for physical exercise, riyada, is very interesting because you see people all over, especially where we live in California. There's people up at 5 a.m. jogging because they want to keep their bodies physically in good shape. And usually it's the more wealthier people that exercise more. If you look at CEOs and people like this, they're always very fit and they take care of themselves. And some of them even talk about this because the body is everything to a lot of these people. This is their world. They reside in their bodies, but they forget that they have souls. And so just like you have exercise for the body, you have exercise for the soul. Just as you can strengthen the muscles of your physical being, you can strengthen your spiritual muscles. Just as you can really beautify your outward through attention to taking care of it, you can beautify your inward through attention to taking care of it. So this is really, I think, a very important concept, the idea of exercising the soul. And then he has the book called Kasru Shahwatain, which is breaking the two desires, because he really saw at the root of the human problem was the appetites. That if you could not control your appetites, you had no discipline. There's a really brilliant, he was president of the University of Chicago. His name was Robert Maynard Hutchins. And I read a speech that he gave. He was honored at the end of his life. And he gave a very interesting speech. And in that speech, one of the things that he said that really struck me, he said, I've been listening to all these people praise me and say what a great man I am. But I have a question for myself, and I'll present it to you. If I'm such a great man, why have I never been able to give up smoking? And obviously people laughed. It's a funny remark. But I actually think he meant it in a much deeper way. That if I'm such a great man, why have I never been able to discipline myself? And that's something, that's a really important question. Why do incontinence, which now means, physicians know this word to mean somebody who can't control their urine or their feces. So they literally urinate in their pants or they soil themselves. That's called incontinence. So like in the hospital, they'll write incontinent to stool and urine. Akrasia, which is where the word comes from, the Greek word incontinence, was traditionally used in ethical traditions to mean people that could not control their appetites. So just like somebody who can, just like you have to be able to control your bodily functions, you should be able to control your soul's functions. So there's an incontinence to the soul that is similar to soiling yourself. So just as you're incontinent to stool and urine, and soiling your physical body, if you're incontinent ethically and spiritually, you're soiling your soul with the najasa. It's the same idea. And so he really saw, if you could control your food, which is one of the reasons why we're fasting, is because food is such a big problem with human beings. If you can control your food, and then if you can control your genitals, if you control your tongue, all these things become easier with those basic controls. And this is why traditionally you have the human being is created in a triune nature. He's been created with reason, with will, and with appetite. So these are powers or faculties of the one soul. So they're different dimensions. So the reason is meant to control. Imam al-Ghazali calls this the rider on the elephant. You know, you need to control the rider or the jockey on the horse. And then you have the appetites. You have the will of the beast, which is his irascibility. And this is called the quwwa al-ghadabiyya, the irascible nature. That nature is meant to ward off harm. And then you have the concupiscent nature, which is meant to accrue benefit. So it's جلب المصالح ودرء المفاسد. But it has to be regulated by the intellect. And so that's why kasra shahwatain is so important, because if you can control these, if you can break these two, you don't want to destroy them, but you want to break their will so that you control them, just like you break a horse by training it. It's called siyasa, yasusa al-hisan. Just like you control a horse, you have to train it. The trainer has a lead rope, and then he usually has a whip, and he trains the horse to prepare it to be ridden, because a horse needs to be broken. Because if it's not broken, it rides the rider, and then it's going to throw you off like bucking bronco. So you don't want your nafs to be a bucking bronco, because it'll throw you off, and you might get up, you're going to be bruised, but you might break your neck. People die, or they're stomped by the horse themselves. So